Hello and welcome. My name is Neve Brooke, a young film programmer here at Film East, and today I'm joined by my fellow programmers Shelby Cook, Zara Litvinova, and Alex Smith. Today we are going to discuss the trilogy inspired all by ice cream, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. This segment is a part of Film East, a Norwich-based young film programmers group supported by Reel Connections and Film Hub South East. For those of you who don't know, Edgar Wright and Shaun Pegg's The Cornetto Trilogy consists of 3 films: Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End, with each film loosely themed on the flavours of the famous ice cream, red being zombie, blue being police, and green being science fiction. Each film received praise from both critics and audiences alike, and to this day can often be found playing on screens across the globe. A unique blend of storytelling, comedy, and filmmaking, the films have achieved a status that other comedies can only dream of.
Okay, so to start off, which one is everyone's favourite?
Well, I'm going to say mine is Hot Fuzz.
The right answer, just
Yeah.
saying.
Because I watched Hot Fuzz. Oh, I watched all of them like a long time ago, maybe like 10 years ago. And I didn't really think anything of them. I was like, oh, these are kind of weird. Like, they're kind of like this weird sci-fi, like, okay. But now that, I am really into like British cinema and that's where my research is in, I found these films, in particular Hot Fuzz, because Hot Fuzz, I think it's the one that's grounded most in reality. Obviously, all the other two have these like very science fiction elements to it.
Yeah.
But I was just like blown away by how, like, because my area of research, and if you listened to our podcast before, we did the episode on 4 Weddings and a Funeral and the Hugh Grant archetype. And in that one, we sort of talked about how British films are very stereotypical and they kind of make these stereotypes of British people. And like, then you watch these films and it's like the complete opposite. Like, it's like the most accurate representation of modern England like I've ever seen. And it's so brilliant. And Hot Fuzz is just, I thought I enjoyed it the most because it was the one that didn't have as much of the science fiction in it. And it was just something that seemed like it could actually happen. Obviously, people aren't going to kill people to have the best village, but it had that sort of element to be like that, that's what would happen if you moved to, if a Londoner moved to the Cotswolds or to, these random like West Country villages.
Yeah, completely. They are so, like, as much as they can be grounded in reality, like every single film. And that's what I think makes them quite universal, is that a lot of people can sort of relate to them in a lot of ways. So that's why, yeah, they're really, really good. Anyone else? What's their favourites?
Well, my favourite is Hot Fuzz as well.
Yeah.
It was the first one I ever saw. I didn't see Shaun of the Dead till maybe 5 years ago. And I saw End of the World in cinema and honestly wasn't that big of a fan. But Hot Fuzz just kind of has a place in my heart and it's just so funny. Yeah. And it's one of those films I could watch literally every single week for the next year and still go back and be like, oh yeah, that's funny. Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Because that's what I think is so brilliant about those films, is that they're so multi-layered that every time I watch it, I see something new, or I understand a joke that I missed once before. There's, in Hot Fuzz especially, people whisper lines. So you'll hear people in the background whispering a joke that you didn't even hear until like your 11th watch. Like, it's so, so brilliant. And even sound design. My close personal friend, Edgar Wright, because I went to a screening at the BFI. Close personal friend. But even the sound design, like hearing it on proper cinema speakers, you hear so much more. Like Shaun of the Dead, I never thought was particularly scary watching it at home, but I was in my seat like, oh my God, because every single detail is so perfectly crafted in these films. Edgar Wright really knows what he's doing. Like, he is such a brilliant director, and I think that's why they are so, I don't know, they are so multi-watchable. I don't think that's a word, but you know what I mean. Like, that's why I just think they're so great.
Well, sound, like in every film I can think of his, is always a really, really, really important element. Yeah. I think it really helps him elevate them to, I don't know what the levels are, but to the next level. Yeah. It's just like another. It's so engaging. So even if what you're seeing on screen isn't really for the next 2 minutes much of what you're interested in, like you will hear and be like, oh my God, that's so cool. That's so engaging. I'm still hooked.
And obviously what he you have that very specific style that all of those films are like edited in.
Yeah.
So, like I watched The World's End last night, and it's all the ones of just the quick shots of the beers going down, and the beers being poured. So it's a very certain style of how they're all made. So they all fit together. Like you can tell they're like, I didn't know before Neve mentioned this. I knew that they were done by the same people, but I didn't know that they were meant to be like a trilogy. So when I found that out, I was like, oh my gosh, it makes perfect sense, because they're all sort of they're in the same world, but they're also not. But it's so interesting because each one serves as a purpose of representing Britain at a different time.
Yeah.
And I would personally love to see if they were to do one. I know it's probably overdone now to do a fourth one, but what they would do now in 2021 Britain, with like post Brexit and post COVID and all of that, and how they would put new characters in there, what their sort of twist would be on it, because it's such a brilliant like time capsules, and like but they all sort of mesh together as one.
I love that actually, because I was, while you were talking, sat here thinking, why do I love these? Why do they really have a place in my heart? And it's exactly that. Like you look at them and it's a representation of a part of every bit, a stage of every British person's life. Mm-hmm. And it's so endearing and almost comforting, I guess, like looking back on memories and photos, even though they're not yours, there's still parts of it that are similar.
Yeah. I think that's I totally agree with what you both said, in that they both really represent sort of Britain as a whole, and not just one type of Brit. Mm. There are different social classes, different education levels, different parts of the country. It's not just, middle class Londoner. Like there's lots of different sort of locations in there. And I also think, for me personally, that they're not lazy. Mm-hmm. Like I think what makes the Cornetto Trilogy so fantastic is like you said about the editing. Like so much craft of filmmaking for these comedies goes in, like match cuts. So they had to, there's so many things that happen, and you can just tell that they love what they're doing, and like there's so much pride in there. And I just think it's so clever, everything that they do.
Yeah, I agree. They're really, really stylistic, aren't they? Yeah. They're really fun to watch because there is always so much going on. With all of the cuts and stuff. I think what I also really love about them is their like real focus on friendship, and the fact that you have Simon Pegg and Nick Frost playing the cute characters in each film. And so I saw Shaun of the Dead first, and watched Hot Fuzz a few years later, and then watched The Walls and a few years later after that. And so it kind of feels like revisiting old friends, and they have like a real chemistry. And a real focus on their friendship, and developing their friendship throughout like all of the films, and I really appreciate that, and that's really good.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I love that there are little moments in the film sometimes when you can see Pegg and Frost kind of slipping, because they are just mates, and you can kind of see them going like giggling underneath their breast, and I just think that's so brilliant, because you've got to have fun. Like film is a weird medium, and if you're making a comedy, they have to feel a little bit human in order to relate for it. And I think that's what they do so well, is that even The World's End, which a lot of people think is the worst one, and whilst I don't think it's the best film ever made, I still think there is a lot of craft that went into that. But you can still see they had so much fun, and it was just a great time. And I think that's why I still go back to it from time to time.
Yeah, that's the undeniable thing about it. You see them having fun, and you really feel it and experience it. And it's not just Edgar Wright and oh my god, I'm forgetting the main actor's name.
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg. It's like you look at it and you can see all of these other British actors who now like have gone on to Hollywood, and they're really famous, but they're grounded in this, and it's like this little community, and like you said, Sarah, they're like old friends coming together, and like it's the sweetest, kindest little thing, and it's really wholesome is the word I'm looking for. It does feel like that.
Rafe Spall has a cameo in all of them, and like when he came in, he was the people who were looking for the home that Martin Freeman was selling, And when he came into the movie on the World's End, I was like, whoa, yeah. I was so hyped to see him. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. It's just like, it's kind of like, you feel like you're part of a club, like watching it. And like, I do feel like in a way it is sort of like laddie films. I think you can sort of label them as laddie films.
Yeah.
But just doing a little bit of background research on Simon Pegg when I was watching The World's End last night, I was like, oh, these are very autobiographical. And they really do represent sort of Simon Pegg's, life in modern Britain. And so obviously he had a stint in rehab for, alcoholism, and that's where The World's End comes from. And just knowing that as the background, and obviously you see that in Shaun of the Dead, when all he wants to do is go to the pub and just, be lazy and do nothing. Obviously you see all those sort of themes that continue out throughout the trilogies, and it's sort of like watching the themes of Simon Pegg's and Nick Frost's life, evolve. And I think watching it from that perspective is also really interesting. So just knowing the history behind the creators, and obviously like you guys said, them knowing that they're friends in real life just brings a new element to it, because you feel like you can enjoy it more, because you feel like, oh, I'm just hanging out with the mates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're amazing films as well. Like for me, my family isn't huge, they're not huge film watchers, and these are the kind of films I can put on. I have 3 brothers, so they're the perfect films to watch with my brothers. I feel like we're really connected. So yeah, I just love them for that as well.
Sort of moving forward, Shaun of the Dead came out in the sort of early 2000s, and the latest one came out sort of mid 2010s. Do you think that the themes in the films and like the sort of overall narratives and like, for example, the presentation of women, do you think they've aged well? Or do you think looking back, you realize that they're a product of their time? Do you think they're still kind of progressive? Like, what do we think?
I was really surprised when I saw you had that question on there, because I didn't obviously the women don't serve a very big part in the narratives, because it is Simon Pegg and Nick Frost's story. But thinking about Olivia Colman's character in Hot Fuzz, she and the way that the way Simon Pegg, he comes down from London, he's all like, oh, I have to say things politically correct. He calls them police people instead of police, men or whatever. And like, he's always trying to correct people for, calling her a policeman or something. And she's like, I'm a policewoman, but like, she doesn't care. And like, I think it was just kind of refreshing to see like that Olivia Colman's character, and like, that's sort of Olivia Colman's like style, is like, she's one with the boys. But like, they're all trying to like, it felt like Simon Pegg's character was trying to sexualize her more than how she was actually being sexualized by her coworkers.
Yeah.
Just because by continuously saying, oh, you're a woman, we have to recognize you for being a woman. Whereas everyone else just treated her like one of the lads. Like, they were just like, oh, let's go have a drink.
Just that character in itself is a joke. So here's another fun fact for you guys. Doris, way back when, was sort of a slang term for a policewoman. They were all called Dorises, and that character's name is Doris because she's the only female policewoman. And so it was meant to be this big joke, and that's why she's so sort of hyper feminized in it, because she's the only one. I think every time I think of that, I'm like, that's so silly. I just think it's so good.
I love that.
I still think to this day that Liz in Shaun of the Dead, though there aren't a lot of female characters, I think in Shaun of the Dead they're the most, even though it's the oldest, they're the most progressive female characters in the film, because Liz doesn't really need saving. Shaun just kind of decides that he's going to, and she's like, what are you doing? I was fine in my flat.
And she makes it worse. He makes it worse for her.
Yeah, the entire time, and she was fine. And I love that she just thinks he's an idiot the entire time, and she can't help but love him. I think she's a really great character, especially for 2005. That's so good.
Yeah. And then when Rosamund Pike comes and saves them at the end of World's End, like Rosamund Pike just shows up and just like, it's always like the damsel in distress being saved, and she saves them. Like, it's just, I didn't personally find an issue with the representation of women. It felt like to me more of very organic, having them part of the story, or it didn't push it to be like, oh, we need to have representation. We need to, you know, the women never felt like they had to be saved in these, you know, stories.
Yeah.
They either like, you know, they were part of the plot, or they were just hanging out on their own and just doing their own thing and just, you know, taking care of themselves. Like it never felt like, oh, they're being feminized, or, you know, being put in their place.
I think that's just a testament to Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg's filmmaking, because like you all said, these are laddie films. You could tell that they were two guys who have made films, not for guys, but you can tell they're definitely like that genre, but they knew that they didn't have to make idiot characters or like women that needed saving. They knew that women were women, and even back then they just wrote characters. And I think that's why, again, these films stand the test of time, because they are just human beings in wacky situations with amazing editing. I don't know if you can tell, but I love these films so much.
I just think films too. I've been converted.
Welcome to the club. I feel like this is now just going to be Edgar Wright fan club. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything else they want to say about the films before we wrap it up?
Well, going off the boys, it is a boy film, like a lad film, but expanding on what you said, I hadn't thought about that before. And normally when I think of a lad's film, I think of something really sexist, not very enjoyable for me, and just, I don't know, a testosterone trip. But this is not at all like that, and it is mainly centered around men, and I'm just now thinking about it, so impressed that they managed to still be in that category. But as a woman, I never thought about it as being in that category. It was just a great film, and that's so impressive to me, because I don't think I've seen many lad films like that before.
I was thinking earlier today, I was like, they're kind of wholesome in a way, because like at The World's End, like all of the boys like all come together just for Gary. Like they just, you know, want to make him feel good. And like, you know, all the characters are like, have really good intentions. They're all very sweet and like nice. And like, it's not like, they're not terrible people. Like, you know, I was like, these are like kind of nice films. Like they kind of make you like feel good. But then like an alien invasion happens and you're like, oh, this is really weird.
I always love Nick and Danny's friendship in Hot Fuzz, because you see throughout the film they start mentioning, like, Danny goes like, oh, what about your peace lily, because he was genuinely worried about him.
Yeah, like that's so wholesome.
So cleverly, like subtly woven into the narrative, because they're not easy narratives to follow. They're huge, complex, self-referential narratives. But no, good job, Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright. We all love you very, very much.
So much.
If you want to come on, you know, that's fine. But
yeah, let's invite them.
Hopefully you've enjoyed our brief discussion today. If you're interested in learning more about the Cornetto Trilogy, you can visit our website to read our article all about the films, as well as other articles related to the topic. If you're interested in contributing to our film and television blog, visit film-east.com/submissions for more information. To learn more about the Film East and young film programmers, visit our websites, film-east.com, or follow us on any of our social media at films_east. Again, we're Film East, a Norwich-based young film programming group supported by Reel Connections and a part of Film Hub South East and the BFI Fan Network.